My name is Lucia Bradford. I'm 43 years old, and I live in a 3-bedroom house in suburban Chicago with my boyfriend and our 10-year-old daughter, Violet. If you're listening to this, I'm going to assume you're not one of those people who smiles politely while quietly measuring children by their gender. You're probably like me, someone who sees a daughter as a miracle, not a mistake. And that's why what happened to my family still makes my stomach twist. Because in 2025, the whole world likes to talk about equality. Companies put it on posters. Politicians say it in speeches. People repost it like it's a trend. But inside my family, a daughter was never a person. She was a placeholder, something you tolerated until a boy arrived. And the night my mother decided to say it out loud, in front of 50 guests, including relatives and business partners, something in me snapped so cleanly I still hear the crack if I let the memory get too close. The disaster started 3 years ago, in August 2022, on an ordinary weekend evening around 7 p.m. We'd finished dinner. Violet had toothpaste foam at the corner of her mouth, still talking about something her teacher said, her hands fluttering with excitement like every detail mattered. My boyfriend was rinsing plates at the sink. The kitchen smelled like dish soap and warm bread. Then came the knock. Not a polite knock, not the kind you ignore and let fade. This was sharp, commanding, like the door belonged to them. When I opened it, the porch light hit 3 familiar faces, my mother, my father, and my brother, Dylan. And instantly, my chest tightened the way it always did around them, like my body remembered the rules before my mind could argue. My father's eyes moved past me and into the house, and he didn't even pretend to see my boyfriend standing behind me. He didn't glance toward Violet either. My mother gave me a cool nod, like I was an employee she didn't fully approve of. Dylan smirked, already looking around like he was counting what I owned. They walked in without waiting to be invited, like the house still belonged to their authority. And right away, the pattern started. My mother sat on the couch like a queen taking her throne. My father folded his hands and stared ahead. Dylan leaned back with lazy confidence, his mouth tilted like he'd already won an argument that hadn't begun. Violet hovered by the hallway, small and hopeful, clutching the hem of my shirt like she could anchor herself to me. My boyfriend stepped forward, polite, trying. "Good evening. Can I get anyone?" My father didn't answer him. Not even a nod, not even eye contact. It was like watching someone erase a person in real time. My mother spoke first, looking straight at me, as if the only adult in the room was the one she'd birthed. "I'm organizing my 65th birthday party," she said. 50 guests, relatives, longtime employees, important business partners. She paused, like she expected gratitude. Then she finished, her voice hardening into something that wasn't a request at all. "You, your partner, and your daughter must be there." The word must landed like a weight on my chest. I didn't blink. I didn't soften my voice. I didn't give her the satisfaction of hesitation. "No," I said simply. "We're busy. We won't attend." The air changed. It wasn't dramatic at first, just the subtle tightening of the room, like someone had turned down the oxygen. My father leaned forward, his cold stare pinning me. Dylan let out a small laugh, the kind meant to make you feel childish. My mother stood, slow and deliberate, towering over me, with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no without consequences. "If you don't come," she said, her eyes sharp as broken glass, "we won't leave you alone." There was no warmth in it, no concern, just control. I felt my boyfriend shift behind me, a protective instinct he tried to keep quiet. Violet's fingers tightened on my shirt, and something old rose in me, the exhausted rage of a woman who'd spent decades being told to be grateful for scraps. "Whatever," I said, "don't threaten me." For a moment, my mother looked like she might slap me. Not with her hand. She wouldn't risk looking messy. But with words. With shame. With that family poison she always carried in her purse like perfume. Instead, she nodded once, tight-lipped. My father stood. Dylan followed. At the door, my father turned back and said coldly, like a judge delivering a sentence, 6 p.m. Saturday next week. Dress properly." Then they left. The sound of their footsteps faded. The car engine started. The headlights swept past our windows, and then silence. Thick, heavy, the kind that makes you realize how hard you were bracing until the pressure disappears. Later that night, when Violet was asleep and my boyfriend had turned off the downstairs lights, I lay in bed staring at the dark. I told myself I wasn't going. I had reasons, real ones. My parents were from the old generation where legacy meant men, and women were treated like labor, reproduction, silence, support, never leadership. Dylan had been handed responsibility at the family company like a crown, not because he was smarter, but because he had a son. And I was the inconvenient reminder that a daughter could still breathe, still build, still succeed, and still be treated like she didn't count. In 2015, I walked away from the family company and built my own life because I refused to be diminished. But what they did after Violet was born, that carved something permanent into me. They came to the hospital for 10 minutes. 10. They didn't hold her, didn't kiss her forehead. My mother glanced at her like she was assessing a purchase she didn't want. Violet's birthdays were worse. 30-minute appearances, cheap gifts, a book, a random doll. Then they vanished. Because they didn't want to love her, they just didn't want gossip. And then there was Lucas, Dylan's son. For Lucas, my parents threw grand parties, bought expensive gifts, beamed like they'd personally invented him. They called him the future with their whole chests. And Violet? Violet was a shadow they refused to acknowledge. I rarely brought her to family gatherings because I couldn't stand watching my daughter learn, little by little, that she was considered less. But that night, as I turned onto my side, my hand slid under my pillow and touched my phone. My thumb hovered over a video I'd watched too many times. A video that was my family's terrible secret. A video that could ruin reputations, tear relationships apart, and collapse the proud little empire they'd built over decades. 6 months earlier, I'd told myself I would never use it, that it was too cruel, that it would destroy too much. But now, after hearing my mother's threat, after remembering Violet's shrinking shoulders in rooms where she should have felt loved, my anger felt like a living thing. And when I stared at the screen, the reflection of my own eyes looked unfamiliar. Not soft, not forgiving, calculated. The next morning at breakfast, I finally said it out loud. "We're going," I told them, keeping my voice calm. Violet's head snapped up, her face lighting like sunrise. "Really? Grandma's party?" she squealed. "Can I wear the blue dress? The one with the little flowers?" My heart clenched so hard it almost made me nauseous. Because she was excited. Even after everything. Even after being ignored. She still wanted to belong. My boyfriend didn't smile. He just watched me carefully, like he was trying to read the part of me I wasn't speaking. And I realized then, I wasn't going because I wanted peace. I was going because I was tired of watching my daughter get hurt while I kept swallowing it. I was going because I needed them to understand. If you humiliate a girl in public long enough, one day you teach her mother how to become dangerous. And I already had the weapon in my pocket. I just hadn't decided exactly when to pull the trigger. The whole week leading up to my mother's birthday party, Violet turned into a little storm of excitement. Every morning, she'd wake up asking new questions, like the answers could change her entire life. "Mom, do you think Grandma likes drawings more than cards? Should I bring glitter, but not too much glitter? I don't want to make a mess. What if Lucas is there? Maybe we can play together." Each question was a tiny needle, because Violet didn't understand the truth. In my parents' world, she wasn't a granddaughter. She was an accident they tolerated. My boyfriend tried to keep things light. He helped her pick out colored pencils. He made hot chocolate while she worked on her gift at the dining table, her tongue peeking out in concentration as she drew a perfect family, with bright smiles and warm hands. He didn't say much to me that week. But at night, when Violet was asleep, he'd sit beside me on the couch and just watch me, the way you watch someone walking toward a cliff. "You're sure you want to do this?" he asked once. I didn't answer, not directly. Because I wasn't sure of anything, except that I couldn't keep letting Violet learn what it feels like to be less. Saturday came too quickly. At 5:30 p.m., we pulled into my parents' neighborhood. Their 2-story house sat there like a monument. Trim lawn, big backyard, a place designed to look perfect from the outside. Even from the street, we could hear it. Laughter, music, the hum of too many people pretending everything was fine. Violet bounced in her seat. "It's so loud. That means it's fun, right?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, baby. It means there are a lot of people." My boyfriend reached over and squeezed my hand once. Not a romantic squeeze. A grounding one. The moment we stepped through the gate, I felt the shift. Eyes turning. Quick glances. Some polite nods. Some looks that slid away too fast, like my presence was inconvenient. Then Dylan appeared. Of course he did. He came down from the porch like he owned the air. His smile was sharp and bright, the kind of smile that didn't warm anything. He didn't greet Violet, didn't acknowledge my boyfriend. He looked at me and said, loud enough for people nearby to hear, "Well, look who finally showed up. You should consider having another kid, Lucia. Maybe you'll get lucky and have a boy this time. Then Mom and Dad might value you again." There it was, the family's favorite sport. Humiliation disguised as joking. Violet's smile faltered. She looked up at me, confused, like she couldn't tell if she was supposed to laugh. My boyfriend's jaw tightened. I felt it beside me like a warning bell. But I didn't give Dylan the reaction he wanted. I stared straight into his eyes and said calmly, "Watch your mouth." His grin widened, thinking he'd won. So I leaned a little closer and lowered my voice, just enough to make it feel intimate. "What if Lucas isn't even your son?" I said. "You should get a DNA test." For a second, the world paused. A couple of nearby guests turned their heads, sniffing drama like blood in water. Dylan's laugh came out too loud, too forced. "No need," he said, puffing his chest. "He looks like me. Smart, talented, handsome. You can't deny that." I smiled, small and cold. I didn't need to deny anything. I just needed time. I walked past him with my boyfriend and Violet, leaving Dylan standing there with that brittle laughter still stuck on his face. Inside the backyard, the party was impressive. A long buffet table loaded with food, decorative lights strung through the trees, a rented tent, a DJ in the corner, employees from the family company in polo shirts smiling a little too hard, business partners holding champagne glasses and pretending they didn't notice the tension underneath everything. My parents stood by the buffet table like royalty receiving admiration. When they saw me, my mother gave a stiff nod. My father's eyes flicked over me and then away, like I was an obligation. Not once did either of them look directly at Violet. Not once. Violet hovered slightly behind my boyfriend, her drawing held carefully in both hands, like it was fragile glass. I guided us toward a group of relatives, cousins who had always been kinder, always more human. Violet loosened a bit there, laughing softly with one of my aunts. My boyfriend made polite conversation with a cousin's husband. And me? I watched. I watched Lucas running around the yard with other kids, loud and confident, like he'd never once been made to feel small. I watched Violet try to join in, careful, tentative, like she'd learned the hard way that you don't take up too much space in this family. I watched my mother's face soften every time Lucas came near her. I watched her face tighten every time Violet entered her line of sight, like Violet's existence was irritating. And I thought bitterly, "You don't deserve to be anyone's grandmother." At 6:30, my mother clinked her glass and announced the party was officially beginning. We sang Happy Birthday. She blew out candles with a bright smile. Everyone applauded. For an hour, everything almost felt normal. Almost. Violet laughed with the other kids. She kept glancing back at me like she was checking if I was still there, if I was still her safe place. My boyfriend stayed close, his hand occasionally resting on Violet's shoulder, like a silent promise. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. The gifts. My mother sat on a decorated chair like a queen, receiving tribute. One by one, people brought presents forward. She opened them with exaggerated delight, complimenting each giver in a way that made them feel important. A necklace, oh, beautiful. A designer bag, you know my taste so well. A perfume set, perfect, absolutely perfect. I felt my throat tighten as Violet stepped forward. Her hands shook slightly. She held out her drawing, a colorful picture of a family gathered together, smiling under a bright sun. She'd drawn my mother with a big necklace, my father with a proud grin, Dylan with a suit, and she'd drawn herself holding hands with everyone. In Violet's world, love was still possible. My mother took the paper between two fingers like she was holding something damp. She glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds. Then she looked up, straight at Violet, her voice flat as ice. "Thank you, Violet. That's it." No smile. No praise. No, "I love it." No, "You worked so hard." Nothing. Violet's face fell. Not dramatically. Just quietly, like a light dimming. And that was the moment my anger stopped being an emotion and started being a decision. Then Lucas's gift came next. My mother's entire body changed. Her eyes widened, her voice lifted. "Oh my God, this is beautiful." She pulled out a luxurious scarf, the kind that didn't belong at a kid's birthday event. It looked expensive, easily $1,500 or more. Dylan and his wife Kristen had obviously bought it and slapped Lucas's name on it like a label. My mother held it up high like it was a sacred artifact. "I love this gift from my grandson," she announced loudly. "This is the aesthetic eye of someone who will inherit the family company later." Applause erupted. People laughed and clapped like trained seals. Dylan stood there, soaking it in like sunlight, his pride swelling with every compliment. Then he leaned toward my mother and said eagerly, "Mom, just announce it now." My stomach turned. My mother nodded solemnly. She reached under the table and pulled out a large wrapped package. "Lucas," she called, her voice syrupy with affection, "I have a special gift for you." Lucas ran up grinning, eyes bright. He tore the wrapping off. Inside was the newest high-end tablet. People oohed and awed, but the tablet wasn't the real gift. The real gift was what my mother did next. She stepped into the center of the yard with a champagne glass in her hand, like she was about to deliver a speech that mattered to history. And she did. "We've decided to make a will," she declared. "All of my and my husband's assets, after we pass away, will be left entirely to Lucas." The yard erupted. Applause. Cheers. Congratulatory shouts. Business partners praised it as wise. Employees smiled like it was a company announcement. Relatives nodded like they'd been waiting for this moment. And Violet? Violet sat beside my boyfriend, clutching her empty hands, her drawing forgotten on the table like trash. I stared at my mother, my hands curled into fists so tight my nails dug crescents into my palms. My blood boiled. Because it wasn't just that they favored Lucas. It was that they did it like Violet wasn't even there. Like her heart didn't count. Like her tears were invisible. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the ground. The sound cut through the applause. The yard quieted slightly, people turning toward me. My mother's smile twitched, already irritated that I was about to ruin the moment. And I asked, my voice tight and shaking with rage, "What about Violet? My daughter is your granddaughter too." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. My mother stared at me like I'd said something stupid. Then she answered, loud and confident, because she truly believed she was right. "Lucas is the only grandson in this family," she said. "He carries the family name. Violet will grow up, get married, take her husband's name, and she'll be busy giving birth and taking care of a family. How can she preserve our heritage?" My boyfriend stiffened beside Violet. I saw Violet's eyes shine, tears gathering, not yet falling, like she was trying to be brave. I felt something inside me snap again, this time not quietly. I leaned forward, my voice sharper. "So you're saying you look down on women? On daughters? On girls?" My mother didn't even hesitate. "That's right," she said, like she was stating a law of nature. "Women should give birth, then take care of the home." A ripple went through the crowd. Women exchanged looks. A few faces tightened with disgust. Someone whispered, "Did she really just say that?" I didn't stop. "Do you realize how many women are successful now?" I demanded. "How many women run companies, lead departments, build empires?" Before my mother could answer, Dylan jumped in, his voice loud and irritated. "Enough," he snapped. "If you have complaints, blame yourself for not having a son. I have a son. I have rights. If you want to compete, go have a boy." The women's faces darkened. I saw a business partner's wife stare at her husband like she was reconsidering his entire character for being associated with this family. Then my father made it worse. He stepped forward, face flushed, and shouted, "Enough, Lucia. You're making us lose face. The fault lies with you. You chose wrong. You couldn't even give this family a grandson." My boyfriend's hand slid protectively around Violet. Violet's lower lip trembled, and then she broke. She cried, quietly at first, then harder, burying her face into my boyfriend's side as if he was the only shelter she had left in that backyard. The sound of my child crying, because of my family, hit me like a physical blow. And in that moment, I stopped caring about consequences. Because some families don't deserve peace. Some families deserve the truth. I slipped my hand into my pocket. My phone felt heavy, like it had been waiting for this. Around us, relatives started pushing back, questioning my parents, calling them out. But my mother's face stayed stubborn. My father's eyes stayed hard. Dylan stood there smug, convinced the world belonged to him because he had a son. And that's when I made the final choice. Not in my mind. Not in my heart. With my thumb. I opened the family group chat. Nearly 40 people in it. My finger hovered over the video. For half a second, I looked at Violet, her cheeks wet, her shoulders shaking. Then I pressed send. A second later, phones started buzzing all over the yard. After another. Like a swarm waking up, people glanced down at their screens. At first confused. Then, I watched Dylan pull out his phone. I watched my mother do the same. I watched my father's hands start to shake. And within seconds, their faces changed completely, like someone had ripped the ground out from under them. Dylan's eyes went wide. My father went pale. My mother's hand flew to her chest like she couldn't breathe. And all around them, the yard began to fill with whispers. Because whatever was on that screen, it was already too late to take back. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The only sound in the backyard was the soft hum of the DJ's equipment still running, absurdly cheerful music playing to an audience that had just stopped breathing. People stared at their phones. Then they stared at each other. Then they stared at Dylan. I watched his face drain of color as the video loaded. His confident posture collapsed into something smaller, fragile. His lips parted, but no sound came out. My mother's fingers trembled so badly she almost dropped her phone. My father had to sit down, one hand braced against the table like the ground itself had betrayed him. On the screen, under harsh parking lot lights, Kristen appeared. Dylan's wife, Lucas's mother. She was standing beside a man none of us had ever seen before. Too close, too comfortable. His arm rested around her waist like it belonged there. The audio was clear. Too clear. "I'm scared one day Dylan will find out Lucas isn't his son," the man said casually, like he was talking about a late bill. Kristen didn't panic. She didn't argue. She smiled, cold and confident. "He won't," she replied. "He's too proud. Lucas looks like him. He'd never question it." Then they kissed. Not a quick, guilty kiss. A slow one. Deliberate. The kind that told you this wasn't a mistake. Around me, gasps rippled through the crowd as more people opened the video. Phones were tilted. Shoulders leaned together. Whispers exploded. "Oh my God. Is that real? That can't be Lucas's mother." One of my cousins whispered, voice shaking. This destroys everything." Dylan staggered back a step like someone had punched him in the chest. "No," he muttered, shaking his head violently. No, this is fake." But his hands were shaking too hard for his lie to land. My mother stared at the screen like it had rewritten her entire belief system. The grandson she'd crowned. The future she'd announced. The inheritance she'd just declared in front of everyone. All of it, built on a lie. Kristen noticed the shift before anyone said a word. She looked up from across the yard and saw the phones. Saw the expressions. Saw Dylan's face. Her eyes widened in pure panic. She didn't scream. She didn't defend herself. She did exactly what guilty people do when they know the truth is undeniable. She ran. Kristen rushed toward Lucas, grabbed his wrist, and yanked him away from the other children. "Mom?" Lucas protested, confused, still clutching the tablet my mother had given him minutes earlier. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer him. She just dragged him toward the gate like the house was on fire. Guests parted instinctively, watching her flee like a criminal leaving the scene. Dylan stood frozen. He didn't chase them. Didn't shout, didn't collapse. He just stared, eyes empty, as the woman he loved disappeared with the child he thought was his. My father slumped fully into the chair, his face suddenly 10 years older. My mother looked around, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to speak but couldn't form words. For the first time in my life, she looked small, humiliated, exposed. And yet, I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd imagined. I felt hollow, because no matter how cruel my family had been, no matter how justified my anger was, this was still devastation. The music stopped. Someone unplugged it. The party disintegrated in awkward fragments. People began making excuses to leave, murmuring apologies and goodbyes that didn't mean anything. No one wanted to be there anymore. They'd all witnessed too much. I stood there holding Violet, her crying finally easing into exhausted sniffles. My boyfriend's arm was wrapped around both of us, solid and steady. And I thought, this is what truth looks like when it finally breathes. After a few minutes, I took Violet's hand. "Let's go," I said quietly. We left without saying another word to my parents. They didn't stop us. They didn't apologize. They didn't even look at Violet. The drive home was silent. 3 people, 3 different storms. The fallout came fast. Dylan filed for divorce within 2 weeks. He quit the family company shortly after and moved to another state, like distance could erase the memory of what he'd lost. Kristen and Lucas vanished completely. No one knew where they went. No forwarding address. No explanations. And the family company? It didn't collapse overnight, but the cracks spread quickly. Business partners had been at that party. They'd heard my mother's sexist rant. They'd seen her glorify one grandson while erasing a granddaughter. They'd watched the video scandal explode. Clients quietly pulled out. Female-led companies cut ties immediately. Employees whispered. Revenue dropped. And when the blame needed a target, they came for me. My phone rang constantly. Voicemails full of rage. Texts accusing me of betrayal. "You destroyed this family. You ruined everything we built. You should have stayed silent." I didn't respond. I blocked every number. I refused to let their regret poison my home. That's when my parents shifted tactics. They showed up. At first it was just knocking, then waiting, then pleading. Rainy days where they stood soaked on the sidewalk like wet statues of their own guilt. Snowy nights where they lingered until their hands turned red with cold. My boyfriend begged me once, quietly. "Lucia, at least let them come inside to warm up." I shook my head. No, not after what they did to Violet. Eventually, I had to call the police. Not because I hated them, but because boundaries matter, even with the people who raised you. The officers were polite, firm. They told my parents their behavior could be considered harassment. After that, the visits stopped. But the guilt trips didn't, until the day I ran into them at the supermarket. Violet was beside me, holding a box of cereal. My mother saw her from the end of the aisle. Her face lit up like she'd spotted oxygen. She rushed toward us, arms open. Violet! Violet stepped back instantly. She hid behind me, her grip tight, her eyes wary. That reaction broke something in my mother. She collapsed into tears right there in the cereal aisle. "Lucia, please," she sobbed. "Give me a chance." I looked at her, not as her daughter, as a mother, and I felt nothing. "You had chances," I said calmly. "You chose not to take them." Then I walked away. 3 years have passed since that night. Violet is 13 now. Confident, sharp, unafraid to take up space. My life is quieter. My company thrives. My home is peaceful. But last week, my parents showed up again. This time holding a new will. Everything left to Violet. And now I'm standing at a crossroads. Do I protect my daughter by cutting them out forever? Or do I let her decide her own future, even if it means inheriting from people who once erased her? I don't know the answer yet, but I know this. Some truths burn everything down. And sometimes, that's the only way anything honest can grow. 3 years after my mother's birthday party burned our family to the ground, life finally became quiet. Not happy in a loud, celebratory way, but peaceful. The kind of peace that comes when you're no longer bracing for the next emotional blow. Violet is 13 now. She's taller, louder, sharper in ways that still surprise me. She speaks her mind without looking down first. She raises her hand in class. She doesn't apologize for existing. The little girl who once tried to shrink herself at family gatherings is gone. And every time I see that confidence, I know I made the right choice, even if the cost was high. My boyfriend stayed. Through the chaos, through the accusations, through the nights I questioned whether I'd gone too far. He never once blamed me. He never said, "You should have stayed quiet." Instead, he said something that still echoes in my head. If protecting your daughter destroys people who were already broken, that's not your fault. My company flourished once I stopped wasting energy on family drama. I expanded, hired more people, and, intentionally, promoted women into leadership roles. Not out of spite, out of principle, because I wanted Violet to grow up seeing proof, not slogans. As for my parents, they disappeared from our daily lives. No calls, no messages, no sudden appearances. Until last week. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. Violet was upstairs doing homework. My boyfriend was fixing something in the garage. The doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I opened the door. They looked older, smaller. My father's hair had gone almost completely white. My mother's shoulders were hunched, like she'd been carrying regret physically on her back. They didn't try to push past me this time. They stood there, holding a folder. "We made a new will," my mother said, her voice thin. "Everything will go to Violet." I didn't invite them in. I didn't take the folder. I didn't ask questions. Because I understood immediately. With Lucas gone, no grandson, no heir, no legacy, they finally remembered the granddaughter they once erased. Not out of love, out of desperation. "You don't get to rewrite history just because it doesn't suit you anymore," I said. My mother started crying. My father stared at the ground. I closed the door. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, long after everyone was asleep. The folder sat unopened on the counter. And for the first time in years, I felt unsure. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just conflicted. Because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about Violet. If I refused the inheritance as her legal guardian, I'd be protecting her from people who hurt her. But I'd also be deciding for her. Taking away a choice that technically belonged to her. My boyfriend sat across from me quietly. "Whatever you decide," he said gently, "make sure it's something Violet would thank you for later, not something that just feels right now." That sentence landed hard. Because love isn't control, even when it comes from protection. Violet doesn't know about the will yet. Not because I'm hiding it forever, but because she deserves to hear it when it's not loaded with my anger. She deserves the truth without poison. Some nights I imagine her at 18, reading the documents herself, deciding what kind of power, if any, she wants over a family that once rejected her. Some nights I imagine refusing everything on her behalf, closing the door permanently. And some nights I realize the hardest part of being a parent isn't fighting for your child. It's knowing when to step back. My parents only came back when they had no other option. Not because they truly changed. Not because they understood the harm they caused. But because the son they built their world around turned out not to belong to them. And the daughter they dismissed built a life without them. Now they want Violet to save what's left. I don't know if forgiveness is strength or surrender. I don't know if inheritance is justice or another trap. What I do know is this: my daughter will never again be made to feel small, never again be compared, never again be told she exists for someone else's legacy. Whether she takes their money or walks away from it forever, the choice will be hers. And for the first time in generations, that alone changes everything. If you've been in a situation like this, where family hurt you, then came back only when they needed something, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Should a parent decide? Or should a child choose when the time comes? Thank you for staying with me through this story. And if it moved you, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Some stories don't end cleanly. They end honestly.